So the topic, acceptable use policies. A lot of folks who have registered for this webinar might already have at least a rough idea about what a policy is and what a policy is there for. Yet others might just be generally curious about the technical side of things and about some of the backgrounds. So just to make sure that we are all on the same level, let's get straight on what an acceptable use policy is and what it's there for. Now, what is a policy anyway? A policy, in short, is a written document which outlines all the things that people are allowed to do and what they are not allowed to do in terms of your of the property of your organization, with regards to internet use. You may have a car policy, you may have all sorts of policies, and they all need to be written down. Those policies ideally also contain details of what will happen if the policy is violated. So are there any consequences attached to that? What happens if somebody happens to break that or to violate that policy? For example, a simple if-then action would be helpful. So if you serve website X, then this will happen. If you serve adult entertainment websites, known to us lesser mortals as pornography websites, then we'll give you a fair warning. We'll read you the riot act. If you then continue, then we will sack you. Something like that. So in order to be effective, a policy has got to be enforced, whatever that may mean for every one of you. And it has to be enforced for everyone in the company equally. The CEO's son or daughter is not magically exempt from this. A policy which is not enforced is worth nothing. You might just as well not have it at all. So a lot of organizations, especially startup companies, have a policy, in inverted commas, that says, hey everybody, we don't want to catch any nasty stuff on our computers, and we don't want to be unproductive, so please stay away from websites that show X. So X may be pornography, racial hatred, or things like shopping portals, Amazon, eBay, you name them. Oh, and while we're on the subject, please don't bring any private pen drives in, because that's dangerous. Oh, and don't install any other programs. So it's not exactly clear-cut. Oftentimes there is no written document, so all this information is conveyed orally to whoever might be listening to it. And also there is nothing that's really indicating what happens if I violate that policy. So it's more a set of guidelines. So guidelines, as you may know, are generally things that you can adhere to. It is recommended to adhere to them, but you're not necessarily obliged to do so. And that's the problem that a lot of organizations are facing. So everybody sort of knows what they are supposed to do and what not. And those two words, sort of, are the problem here. No one is exactly sure until the brown smelly stuff hits the whirly thing. So oftentimes the formation of a policy will look like, okay, we don't want you to serve shopping websites. If you do, then yeah, well, please don't do it. So people, being people, they will of course say, no problem, I can do that, and then immediately forget all about it. So as convenient as those regulations, if you want to call them that, are, and however helpful they are in a startup company, there are still some major drawbacks. Granted, if you have this relaxed and open spirit, this open atmosphere, this helps creative juices flowing, it gets people communicating, it enables you to make stuff happen. Let's put it that way. But if, for instance, the policy is violated, then you're facing a set of challenges that range from malware infections to a whole host of other things, of yet other things, I should say. So if there is a major malware infestation, then there might also be loss of data. So some virus has infected the network and has taken all of our file servers down. And also, if employees are capable of installing applications on their machines, now that might be a completely different problem. Now, if one of your employees decides to install a file sharing application and starts downloading the latest movies or music or whatever else he may want, because you have a nice fat leased line with loads of bandwidth, then your organization might be liable to copyright infringements. So if your organization's online connection is used to perform any copyright infringements, then authorities will not come after the user, the employee, but after you or your organization. They are not interested in the least bit which person actually did it. So you or your organization, you leased that line, your line was used, so you are liable. The end. The company may then be hit with a fine. The loss of reputation, if that is made public, which it will be at some point, is, well, pretty difficult to calculate. Now we know what a policy is. We also know what a policy is not and what is not a policy, if that makes sense. A policy, in short, needs to be written down and it needs to be enforced. That's what I would like you to take away from that. So what do policies actually do? For one, they help our companies stay productive. So no doubt about that. Policies will also help your company stay safe from, any court cases, from copyright infringements, or from malware. And security is oftentimes perceived as a hindrance or an obstacle. And again, people being people, they will at some point start to see those obstacles as a challenge, like a hurdle that screams, "Please jump over me." So I mentioned that example earlier today. Think security doors. If your employees have to punch in a 10-digit code every time they want to enter the building, they will at some point try to find ways around it. And they will use a device known to lesser mortals as a wooden wedge and will try to prop open that door. So what do you have this super fancy lock for then? And that's the tricky bit. People will go to enormous lengths to cut corners and make lives easier for themselves. So this is where your internal security can face, well, a pretty serious test. So what are you going to do about all that? Well, when it comes to internet use, one approach would certainly be to put certain websites onto a blacklist, which you know that people are using, but I would say good luck with that one, because for each website that you block in that way, there are already at least 2 alternatives waiting. So it might not be long-term sustainable. So that doesn't seem the way to go. Now, I cannot tell you how to secure your environments. I don't know your organizations, I don't know your employees, and I don't know your culture. But what I can do is give you a few hints and a few tools to help you leverage those daily admin tasks. So back to the enforcement of policies, one way of preventing people from doing what they may feel entitled to do is use some sort of surveillance and monitoring. Now, that is not the road that GData goes. Let me make that clear first up. But surveillance and monitoring in some countries are absolutely permissible, provided that your users have been informed about this. Also, depending on the law in the country where you live, there may be very clear regulations as to what you can do and what you can't do. you would have to be, I would say, quite lucky if you were able to sack somebody based on information that you obtained illegally. So if you're taken to court over this, which in some countries will invariably happen, you'd better be able to prove to you that your employees are aware of the fact that you or that the user's activity were being monitored. So again, monitoring is out of the question for GData. What we do offer is a reliable web content control that puts you in charge over what kinds of websites are allowed under your own acceptable use policy. So this web content filter is based on categories. Now, each and every website out there is assigned at least one category: social media, shopping, adult entertainment, arts, healthcare information, fashion, you name them. Now, the category database is maintained by one of GData's technology partners. If they are not sure that, if they are not sure which category a certain website belongs to, then it will be put into a category which is called no category. So even if there is a website that doesn't fit any of the currently 61 categories, then it fits category number 62, which is called no category. Now, I understand that it takes quite an amount of time to implement a good and an effective acceptable use policy when it comes to internet use. So one approach that you could take here is to start with the most restrictive setting that you can envision practically, and then start building on that. So instead of leaving all doors open and leave users free to do whatever they please and closing one door after the other, you can start off with one or two open doors and open more of them as required. And you can involve your users in this. That serves two purposes, actually. First of all, you get real-life data. So you may sit in your office and think up this great strategy of which websites and which categories to block, and then it turns out that the considerations that you have met are, not necessarily congruent with the real world. So you get to know the requirements of your users by involving them. Plus, if users feel that they can contribute to a policy and to security to a certain degree by suggesting that a certain website or category be cleared, then they may also feel more inclined to follow the rules, as opposed to, harboring a grudge about them because that rule set has been forced on them by somebody who doesn't understand what they need or what they want or what they do, and they feel that they might feel restricts them too much in what they're trying to do. Of course, that is an ideal utopian scenario from a world where everybody understands and lives and breathes security. To be perfectly honest, I do not expect any users to leap up and down with excitement when it comes to putting regulations in place that might at some point or other conflict with their own interests. But once in place, you can be sure that the policy is adhered to because the user helped build it. So a website is blocked as soon as the user tries to access it. You can, in the GData solution, leave an option open for users to request access to a certain website. So let me show you that in the software itself. Bear with me. I'm just bringing up my virtual machine. There we go. So what you see here is the part of web content control in GData's Policy Manager. And there's not a whole lot to it. You can enable it, and then you have all those 61 categories which are currently part of GData's Policy Manager. So you have finance, you have discussion boards, you have job portals, you have music websites, you have the old pornography, shopping websites. So whatever category you're dealing with, you just need to put a tick in each box for the category that you would like to allow. And if you don't want people to serve websites that belong to a certain category, then you just remove that tick. So if you don't want people to serve websites that relate to drugs, remove that tick, click apply, and that's it. So you don't need to maintain pages and pages and pages of blacklists or whitelists. All you need to do is put one tick in a box or remove one tick from a box in order to make people obey the rules and not serve those websites. And as I said, you can leave an option open for users to request permission to access a website. All you need to do for that is put yet one more tick in a box up here, which says allow the user to report blocked web content. So bear in mind, if a user runs into the barrier, if you will, that is set up by the Web Content Control module, no report for the administrator will be generated. Again, GData is not a monitoring solution. So if the user runs into that barrier and decides to leave it at that, then, as they say, no harm, no foul. Only if a request for access is sent will the admin ever get to know about this. And honestly, no user in his right mind would try getting clearance for a pornography website unless it is work-related. In which case, I would be curious whether they are currently hiring. But joking aside, that's the general idea. Now, setting this up is, as you have seen, quite easy. If you use a proxy server, then you can enter that information as well. Put the tick in the box, click apply, you're done. And if a blocked website is reported, then that will show up in the reports of the GData management server, and you can then decide whether or not you would grant permission, and you can decide if you would like to grant permission only for this one computer, for a group of computers, or for the entire network. If it turns out that the category might actually be something that your users need to have access to, you might want to consider allowing the category in the policy manager. Now, I also mentioned applications. Now, if you worry about security at all, which no doubt we all do, you want the greatest amount of control possible. You want to define which applications users can use and, more importantly, which applications they cannot use. Just think about the file sharing scenario I mentioned a couple of minutes ago. So this is where the application control module comes in. This module can be operated in whitelist mode or in blacklist mode. Blacklist mode obviously defines those applications that are an absolute no-go as far as your acceptable use policy is concerned. In there, you can put all the applications that you know people are using, so you can ban those applications specifically. But same as with websites, often there are 2 or more alternatives waiting in case one becomes unavailable for a user. Just think of that landfill of available flavors of BitTorrent clients. So if Azurius isn't working anymore, well, big deal. I just use MicroTorrent or Transmission or whatever other BitTorrent client is out there. Alternatively, you can block a certain software vendor. So if people are known to spend hours and hours on end playing World of Warcraft while they are supposed to work, then you could go and block all applications from Blizzard Entertainment in that example. So you see, blacklisting applications is certainly a way to go despite its potential shortcomings. The other way of operating the application control is whitelist mode. Contrary to what you do in blacklist mode, the whitelist holds all those applications which have your blessings and the blessings of your senior management. Those may then include your Office suite, your ERP system, your CRM tools, your CAD programs, your phone software, and so on and so forth. What both modes have in common is that in order to add a new rule, you need to know, or the application control needs to know what it is blocking in the first place. So again, I'm switching over to my virtual machine, and I'm going to show you what this looks like. So just bear with me for a second. So there we go. Right. So here we have application control. So in order to set up a new rule, all you need to do is read the file, excuse me, read the criteria from the file that you are trying to block of that application that you don't want to be used on the network, or that you want to have used on the network. So in this example, I've enabled the application control module. I've set it to blacklist mode, and now we are going to add a new rule. So in order to do that, we click on New. We want to base the rule on a certain file. And now what we can do is we select the machine that we would like to apply this rule to. And then we just go into the installation folder of the application that we're trying to, in this case, block. So let's go in here. And we just use that here to select the executable file, click OK. And after that, all those criteria of the files are read automatically. So the file name, checksum, product name, copyright, and file version. So those criteria, I think, are pretty straightforward. If you base a rule on those criteria, then users would have a hard time getting around this by moving the file to a different location or by just renaming it. So we just use it like here. And if we feel inclined to, we can also add a note to our new rule. So there's our new rule. We click Apply, and that is basically it. So you see, it's pretty straightforward and does not need an awful lot of configuring. And same as with web content control, users can also request permission to access an application that would otherwise be blocked. So if for any reason they start an application that is on the blacklist, then you can go to your reports and then make a decision. Is this really a business relevant application? Does this user actually need it? You might want to send them an email or give them a call to clarify that. But once you've clarified that, you can then give your go or no go for that particular application. So now we've covered web content control and we've covered application control. So I'm just reading the question from Martin here. Well, the question that Martin asked is actually quite a good one. I'm reading it out to you. It is, what happens if the user updates the application and therefore the checksum changes? Is that blocked by default? Well, depends first of all how you configured your application control. But generally, if the checksum and file name, or if just the checksum has changed, then the file and the application does not match the original entry anymore, and you probably would have to amend that particular rule. But then again, if a user is allowed to install updates by himself for an application, you might want to have a look at whether or not this is actually something that the user is supposed to be able to. So if he or she has a World of Warcraft client on his machine and installs an update for it, you might well ask, well, why do you have that on your machine anyway? And also, when we just take that scenario, you also can get a list of all applications that are installed on any given client. You have that in the client overview window on the software tab. So if there's any application in there, you will see it. So in that case, you might need to check back with your users, but that question is actually quite a good one. I think we should talk about that later on, either sometime later today or after the webinar. Right. So we've got all of our bases covered for application control. We've got web content control in place. Now, there's one thing that gives a lot of network administrators, I would say, a royal pain in the neck, to put it carefully. Now, that would involve, you probably guessed it, USB devices. Now, USB devices probably will not get smaller in physical size than today, but they hold ever-increasing amounts of data. Now, if a few years ago somebody had told me that I could have in my pocket a device that holds 128 gigabytes of data, and the device, i.e. the SSD card, is no bigger than my thumbnail, I would have probably questioned that person's sanity. But we see those things nowadays. So just a handful of those cards has enough capacity to store entire servers full of information, and that is quite an issue, because we can hardly ban those things physically from our premises, unless, that is, we want to X-ray all of our staff every time they come in. And that is, I would say, hardly acceptable, let alone healthy. So a lot of damage can be done with a plain USB drive that was, in inverted commas, lost in a parking lot, in an elevator, or the washroom. So none of you, of course, would dream of plugging in a pen drive that you just happened to find in the hallway. But a lot of other people would. And they're in good company. Now, a few years back, there was one incident where a USB drive, which somebody found in a parking lot, caused a major malware infestation in a computer network. And that network happened to belong to the United States Army. Now, there were, let's put it that way, there were questions asked after this incident. This incident also led directly to the formation of what is now known as the US Cyber Command. Cases exactly like that put the topic of device management on a lot of people's maps. Now, if any of you can look me in the eye and assure me that none of your users would ever plug in a pen drive that they found in the hallway, in the parking lot, or the washroom, then you would certainly not have a problem if I came to one of your buildings and strategically lose a handful of brand new 128 gig flash drives with a little payload on them. So I don't even need to enter your buildings and potentially trigger a security alarm. Just take it as a mental exercise. Can you vouch for each of your 5 users, for your 50 users, for your 100, your 1,000 users? Well, I'm sorry, but I believe not. I mean, after all, we are security people. We trust nobody and we trust nothing. So what you want to do is regulate the use of such media on your network. Now, there are two ways of handling this. There is a physical way and there is an electronic way. The physical way, if you will, consists of a new pair of shoes, and it also involves a hot glue gun. I'm not making jokes here. I know of administrators who have just straight up glued their USB ports shut. It works, I give them that. So nobody can plug in any old USB drive and get the network infected, and nobody can, download potentially classified data from a network. So I give it that. The downside is obviously that this process, hot gluing those USB ports shut, is a pretty terminal way of handling that issue. So the second way of handling this involves a software solution. Now with that, you can make sure that your data integrity is still there. So nobody can download potentially classified information to their private USB drives and then walk out of the door with it. It also makes it more difficult for malware to spread across your network. Because if you have ever worked as a network administrator in any kind of school or university, then you probably have I would say you've seen your fair share of action when it comes to incident response and malware removal from a USB drive. So GData can regulate a number of different device types. The most widely used one, and the one that I've been talking about mainly in this presentation, would be USB mass storage. So any external hard drive, any pen drive, and also some mobile phones will probably fall under that category. Now a device class will tell the system which type of device was plugged in. So let's say you plug in a pen drive, and the pen drive will contact the system kernel and announce, hello, I'm an XYZ brand USB storage device with X gigabyte storage capacity. And then the system recognizes that and tells the device, all right, welcome XYZ brand storage device. You now will be assigned the drive letter D. Please queue up with the other drives. And then the user can access it, read files from it, and can also write files to it. And that's where the device control module kicks in. It recognizes the type of device and immediately puts a stop to any activities that the user may want to do on those particular devices. The user will instead see a warning on the screen that says, sorry, USB storage is forbidden as per our corporate policy, and you've probably guessed it, you can also leave the option open for users to request access to a certain device. So in GData, you can regulate the type of access. So you can block devices altogether, so no read, no write. You can give users read-only access. So one application might be a sales agent in the field who needs to access his, his price lists, which he happens to have stored on a USB drive. So no problem there. The administrator can give them read permissions on the device, but the user still cannot write anything to it. And lastly, of course, there's full access. So I'm switching over to my virtual machine and over to my device control. So again, device control is enabled for all users. Users can report blocked devices. And now we want to set USB storage, external storage media to access denied. It's as simple as that. So just a few mouse clicks and you have excuse me there. Hang on a second. My mouth is getting dry. Okay, so just with those few mouse clicks, you have significantly increased security in your customers or your own networks. So even if your policy says that USB drives, pen drives, are absolutely forbidden in your network, there still might be some pen drives that need to be accessible in the network. For instance, your IT admin staff might have all sorts of things that they need for their daily work stored on a pen drive. Diagnostic tools, setup files, documentation, you name it. So this information obviously is work related, and they do need it for, what they are paid for. So what you can do is you can set up exceptions in the GData administrator. And also that is remarkably simple. I have here in my hand now a USB drive, which I'm about to plug into this very machine here. And setting up an exclusion for a device goes like this. So you have your employee plug in the USB drive on his machine. Then you click on New. You select the device class, which in this case is already selected, and you select the access type that you would like to grant. In that case, it's our IT admin staff, and we want him to have full access to whatever he needs. And then we need one criterion that clearly identifies that one USB drive. And in the case of pen drives, that would be the hardware ID. Now, the hardware ID is unique for every pen drive out there, even if it's the same make and model from the same batch, rolled off the production line on the same day and the same hour, they are still going to have a unique hardware ID. And that's what you base the list, what you base the rule for device control on. So we select the machine that the device is plugged into. In this case, we only have one machine in the list, which sort of makes things easier. You select the device, you click OK. Then you can add a node if you like. Click OK again. Here is our new rule. You click Apply, and there you go. That's all it takes to add a new rule, a new exclusion to your policy manager. Now, if somebody needs access to a device which you don't want to whitelist, then what you can do is you can grant access to it temporarily. And you would do that based on the report which is generated when the user actually requests permission to access the device. So in the report, you would just select the access type that the user needs. For example, read-only access, because he needs to open a certain file on his USB drive. And then you can furthermore specify access is granted for the next hour, for the next 2 hours, for the rest of the day. So that's that. But as with all mechanisms that allow for exceptions, exceptions should be used sparingly in order to maintain your overall security. And coming back to your policy documents, yet again, anything that you exclude from the rules, any exclusions that you make, must be or should be documented in order to save yourself a lot of work on the back end if things go pear-shaped. So anything that you document doesn't, or anything that you put into your documentation also implies that your policy doesn't have an exception, because no policy can have an exception, but you rather amend your policy to say, for instance, something like the use of external USB media is forbidden for users. Mechanisms to prevent the use of such devices are in place. The company-issued pen drives assigned to the IT admin team are exempt from this. Refer to Appendix B of this document for a list of all IT admin staff. You know, something along those lines. And that also ties in with the whole network documentation that ideally everybody should have. So I've got one more topic to cover when it comes to the policy manager. And that is, you know, has a sort of lighter tone to it than all those dire things with, you know, legal consequences, etc., etc. And that is the regulation of internet usage time. Now, internet usage time can be regulated also using the GData Policy Manager. And you have a set of different approaches here. You can give you can release certain time slots that people can use at their own discretion for surfing the web. So, for instance, from 11 to 12, people are on their break, and they can do whatever they please on the internet, so long as it doesn't violate the policy settings and the web content control settings that you have configured over here. So within that time frame, users can do whatever they like within the confines of what is defined in the policy manager, but not outside those defined time frames. The other approach that you might want to take is to assign each computer a quota. So you can assign a user or a specific computer, I don't know, 8 hours a week of internet usage time. So what you're saying there is, I don't care when you surf the web, but please don't do it for longer than 8 hours every week. So a user could, in theory, spend an entire day in the week just surfing the web and doing whatever he needs. Or he can do 1 to 1.5 hours per day, and you know, use this time that he has you know, at his command as he or she sees fit. So probably will feel less restricting for a user if you assign them a quota. That is, by the way, the same mechanism that our home user line of products also has in its parental controls. So if you will, the internet usage time is a sort of parental control for more grown-up kids, if you like. So that pretty much covers all that I would have liked to cover about the policy manager. I hope this has been at least remotely interesting for you, and that you can take something away from it and involve it in your own admin work or in your sales process. But in any case, if you know more now than you did before, then I'm happy. If you have any questions, then now is the time. And if you need a bit of space to let all the information sink in, then ask questions later and just go on and write me an email. So if you have any questions, then put them into the questions box of your GoToMeeting window. And I'm also going to stop the recording now, so we have sufficient time for our Q&A session. Okay, so one question is, how long does it take until the new rules for a device become active on a client? that depends on how the synchronization period on the management server is set. Hang on, let me show you that in my virtual machine. So when you go to your server settings, what you're going to have at the top is the option for synchronization. And that can be set to a value anywhere between 1 minute and 60 minutes. So the default setting is 5 minutes. So at worst, it takes 5 minutes for all those settings that you make, whether it's for device control or for the monitor or for your web content control, etc. The worst that can happen is that it takes 5 minutes for the client to accept those rules, or up to 1 hour if you have set the synchronization period that way. Alternatively, if you have set the synchronization period to 1 hour, but need those settings to be effective as quickly as possible, you can just reboot the machine, because at every reboot, the client automatically connects to the management server right after the service has come up. Does that answer the question? Okay, excellent. Now, there was another question here. Hang on. Okay, the one other question would be, is it possible to unblock some web content during, i.e., lunchtime? Well, it is actually, but those need to be kept track of permanently. So I guess the direction you were going into is if your policy says, for instance, that social media websites are not allowed, whether or not it's possible to allow them for the time of the lunch break. Say, allow social media websites from 12 to 1 or something like that. Is that the direction that you're going into, Daniel? Okay, so at the moment, we don't have this possibility, but it's certainly one that we should be thinking about, because I think it makes a lot of sense. But it depends on how it is being used, because it then again opens up a lot of possibilities to weaken a policy which was supposed to make the network safer. So that may be subject to discussion with our product management, but I'm more than happy to put a feature request in about that. Okay. Are there any other questions about any of the topics that were discussed during the presentation here? Silence came the stern reply. So at the moment, the question was whether or not it's possible to customize the settings for each user in detail. Yes and no. At the moment, any settings that you make in the GData administrator are computer-based. They are not, in brackets, yet user-based. There are plans to do that, but I can't give you a time frame when that is going to be implemented. So at the moment, we are working under the assumption that every user has his own fixed computer, that he only uses the machine that was assigned to him or her. You're welcome, sir. Okay. Any more questions from any of you? Okay, that does not seem to be the case. In that case, I would like to thank you for your time and attention. Thank you for the feedback that you've put into the questions window. If you have any other remarks and any other type of feedback, then feel free to write me an email or chat me up on Skype or whatever you would like to do. And then I'd say I call it a day. Have a great rest. Have a great rest of the week. And I hope to see and hear all of you very soon.